ADHD video. So for today, what we're going to talk about is ADHD and how it impacts relationships and what perhaps we can do to help out ourselves and our significant other that might have ADHD, or perhaps a close friend or family member. So there are multiple tools that we can utilize in order to help out. Knowledge truly is power. The more we know ourselves, the more we know our partner, the more we know our friend or family member or colleague, the better we can help them out. And vice versa, it goes both ways. The better you can also be helped out as well. Whether it be by you refining yourself or by somebody else helping you out with the needs that you need. So while in grad school, thankfully, I was blessed with quite a bit of helpful resources they provided me that I wanted to help you guys out with too, because they have been of a lot of help to me. And after reading so many posts on Health Unlocked about one partner being fed up or up the wall with their significant other or spouse, and after speaking and working with a lot of people myself who have ADHD, and seeing the struggle in their own relationships, I really want to bring some insight and I really want to bring some help, because having ADHD is no joke, as I've said in a lot of other videos. So I really want to help you guys out with that. Every relationship, every individual requires different needs and expects different things, and the ADHD can certainly complicate this. And we have to understand that there exists taking care and helping out the ADHD, that there also exists taking care and helping out the person and the unique nature of their personality, cognitive functions, and what they need. So in this one, it's going to be a little mixture of both. So I wanted to provide a couple of resources to help you and your partner out. Let's do a little deep dive, shall we? Resource number one, we have the Myers-Briggs, the infamous MBTI exam. Carl Jung and the 16 personality types. Now, amongst those 16 foundational personality types, there exist subvariants of those personality types, and there are millions of subvariants. So you can have two people with the same personality. They can be two different people entirely. So what I recommend you do, I left the link down below where you can take the examination and find out what your own personality and cognitive functions are. And then you can find out your significant others as well. So I recommend you take the test 3 times and be completely honest. And if you don't know a word or what something means, please look it up. You want to be as realistic and as honest as possible to yield the best results. So I recommend you check that out. And then you find out more about yourself. And it's going to help you understand more of this video. And then perhaps, if you like, you can watch one of my other videos, ADHD, and how it impacts the different personality types. It'll give you a lot of insight into the pros and cons and how ADHD is involved. Moving along, we have the second helpful link and resource being provided by yours truly. We have the 5 different love styles. So on the first list of love styles here, out of the 5, we have number 1, the avoider. Avoiders, coming from homes that are often low in affection, but which place high value on independence and self-reliance. The avoider grows up learning only to take care of themselves, to deal with anxiety of having so little comfort and nurturing from their parents, etc., etc. You can read that on if you get that result later on. Or we have the second choice, the pleaser. The pleaser. Pleasers usually grow up in homes with a parent who is overly protective, angry, and or critical. Pleaser children do everything they can to be good and avoid troubling their highly reactive parent, etc., etc. Or, the third option, we have the vacillator. Grown up with an unpredictable parent, vacillators' needs aren't top priority. Without consistent parental affection, they develop feelings of abandonment, etc., etc. Or perhaps you might be a controller. Controllers need control to ensure that the vulnerable and negative feelings they experience in childhood remain suppressed from their adult lives. Having control means having protection from feelings like fear, humiliation, and helplessness. However, anger is one of the However, anger is the one emotion that is not vulnerable. Or perhaps are you a victim? The victim. Kids survive a chaotic home environment by trying to stay under the radar, making themselves as invisible as possible. They'll hide and appease, learning how to escape into their own heads to lessen the pain from their angry, violent, chaotic parents, etc., etc. And that says quite a lot about someone. As we can see, a person's upbringing and the environment of which they grow up in is truly important. It says a lot about them and what they need and what's required sometimes for them. So something to look into if you're a partner, something for you guys to talk about. So I highly recommend that the both of you find out what your love style is each, so you can help each other out and better understand each other and help out the ADHD as well. Let's go on now to the next point, to the next helpful link. Next helpful link to help you out in your relationship is the Enneagram. The Enneagram examination is very interesting because it correlates quite a bit with your cognitive functions. So we see our skill set within our cognitive functions when we take the MBTI, and you see your 4 core functions. Now, what drives your personality is something different entirely a lot of the time, and that comes also from our childhood. It's hard to notice a theme. Our childhood is quite important. So, if you're a parent, really take that into consideration. But going back to what I was saying, the Enneagram exam, basically, it gets its information, interestingly enough, well, besides the questions, obviously, but it's a big reflection upon a lot of our childhood trauma. Now, all of us have different sorts of traumatic incidents of different levels and different varieties, and we were younger, and a lot of the time that's what forms our Enneagram function. So when I found out my Enneagram function, it was like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. And having inattentive ADHD and having it undiagnosed until my mid-20s, I can certainly understand why this is my Enneagram number. So a lot of introspection, a lot of deep dive learning I did for myself, and I'm like, wow, I have a lot of these characteristics, and wow, do I need to work on this and that and this and that. So you're probably going to have one of those moments as well. So I recommend you and your partner go individually and take the Enneagram exam so you can see what your biggest drives are. The Enneagram exam yields quite a bit of information. It's going to give you a lot of information as to what situations and circumstances can be helpful and which ones are not helpful, what you kind of need, what, habits and things of that nature that can certainly be of benefit to know for your partner and for yourself. So the Enneagram exam is really helpful, and I really recommend it. The link is down below. Let's move on down to the next part. And for the final point of assistance here, we have the 5 different love languages. There are 5 different ways in which some research has shown that people show and require affection. So go check that out. Go take the examination. But first, let's do a little talking about it. So here we have the 5 love languages. These are things that we do in order to display and show our love to our friends and our significant other and other people, etc., etc. So the 5 love languages. We have the first one. These are people who give words of affirmation, are very supportive, loving, encouraging to people. Then we have number 2. These are people who like to give gifts or like to receive gifts. It just makes the biggest difference in the world to them. And then we have 3, acts of service. These are people who appreciate being helped out, having things done for them. And this can be definitely very relatable to a lot of people with ADHD who had such a difficult time doing something when they were younger that having help with something meant so much that they grew to have that as their love language. So it could be that for certain people with ADHD. And we have the other one, we have quality time. These are people who just love spending time together with the person that they're interested in, their significant other, their family members, their friends. Just that quality time, that time between them and fill in the blank. And then we have number 5, we have people whose love language is physical touch. So take that as you will, and take the examination. Alrighty, so hopefully some of those points were of some assistance and some help, and can hopefully bring some insight to you and your significant other with ADHD. So for today's special guest of honor, we're going to be working with the ENFJ and the ESFJ. Before we delve into it though, I do want to clear it up with y'all watching that these points are not exactly universal to each and every ESFJ and ENFJ. That is the uniqueness of each and every human being. Our unique nature. You can put multiple ENFJs and ESFJs in the same room. They can be completely different people. Let us also understand that each and every one of these letters, the 4 cognitive functions, can all change. We can refine some of these. We can make some of them worse. Sometimes life forces us to refine some, and sometimes life circumstances causes us to unrefine or fall back on a couple of the letters that we got. So we do got the possibility and chance and likelihood to change, but it takes effort sometimes, and a lot of effort and consistency and renewal, long sustained attention, follow-up. If you didn't know already, those are things that are very hard for people with ADHD. And I'm a true believer of Carl Jung and what he said, that we have to make the unconscious conscious for us to even start working on ourselves. A lot of us got a lot of unconscious bad habits that we do. Things, thought processing that we're not even aware of that can be troubling to us. And you tie in ADHD to that, and it complicates the whole thing. So, the reason why I made this series is because I've worked with quite a bit of people with ADHD. And I see some of these issues rise up quite frequently amongst people who I work with who have these cognitive functions. So, while all these might not hit home for you, perhaps somebody else watching, some of these will. Let's go into this with an open mind. When we got ADHD, it's not always easy to accept our difficulty or struggle, or to admit and speak out loud, or for some of us to even fathom the thought that we got difficulty in one area. So I'm going to try to make this as easy to digest as possible. I know some people can be a little sensitive, especially when it comes to matters as these, but I truly want to help out people with ADHD, and I want to help out people's relationships with ADHD as well. Because ADHD can absolutely destroy a relationship, can make it really difficult, can really make stuff unpredictable, and can really drive some of us up the wall. So, let's dive into this with an open mind. If right now you don't feel like you're in the mental state to watch this, perhaps it's been a bad day, you haven't eaten yet, you haven't eaten enough, you haven't gotten enough rest, the in-laws are coming over and staying over for 2 months, stuff of that nature. If you're not feeling good right now, perhaps step aside and come back at a different time. But for those of us who are ready to go, let's jump ship and let's learn a little more about the ESFJ and the ENFJ. Let's learn some terms before we jump into the whole nitty-gritty. Let's go. Now, the ESFJ and the ENFJ, they are both FI DOMs and they are TI Inferior. What does that mean? Let's find out. ESFJ, ENFJ are FE DOMs. Once more to reiterate. FE focuses on forming and maintaining social bonds with other people, with an eye towards creating supportive and harmonious relationships. When FE DOMs rely too heavily upon FE, they will identify with FE's activities, using their attentiveness to relationships or sense of social responsibility to construct the foundation of their identity. Because of this, FE will continually feel threatened by the TI perspective because TI has the potential to disrupt or shatter one's own ego image. TI is focused on impersonal, critical analysis, using detached factual rules and formulas to navigate the world with independence and confidence. But FE tends to misinterpret TI as being cold, irresponsible, neglectful, harsh, arrogant, or even antisocial. Perhaps a little reflection is due. So FE really likes a lot of harmony between people, those they care about, and connections, and stuff of that nature. The question is sometimes at what cost? At what cost are we willing to maintain that harmony? I've worked with many ESFJs and some ENFJs as well. ESFJs are much more common here in the US according to research. ENFJs are in the lower echelon, along with my own cognitive functions. But at the same time, we have to know what our strengths and weaknesses are as people. Again, not all of these might apply, but some of these might apply. And some of these are gonna almost stubbornly gonna want to come in, and we might be like, no, that's not me. That is not me. I don't have a problem with that. And then maybe a few minutes or a few days later, we're like, okay, maybe I got a problem with that. It's okay. It's not easy to accept some of these things. When I did this for myself, I looked at the research. I was like, God dang, I got a problem with the majority of this stuff. I gotta start working on it. I do believe in innovation, which is why I believe that each and every person watching this can refine themselves, can change, can improve. Not just the self, but the relationship. Both individuals can improve. We just have to want that. Every person out there that's close to you can want you to change as a person. But if the self doesn't want to change, no one's going to make you change. You as a person have to want to improve, have to want to refine yourself. And I'm hoping that a lot of you watching are somewhere on that trajectory. We're all on a different path in life. That's the unique nature of who we are, but we should really aim to try to improve ourselves. So, with these points, they're going to be a little harsh, okay? Just giving you all a heads up. So, let's go into them. Weaknesses of FE dominance. Also, a heads up, a little side note. I'm going to be delving into some scenarios I've seen with ADHD with some of these points and adding some personal antidotes and stuff of that nature. And the points that are highlighted in red are points that are quite consistent with ADHD, with what I've seen in the research and what I've seen from people I've worked with who have ADHD. So that's not to say that the other points that are not in red are not common with ADHD. Of course, they can be, and this differs from person to person, though. But also, these issues are not unique only to ADHD. There are ESFJs and ENFJs all around that don't have ADHD that have issues with some of these things. It's just that those of us with ADHD perhaps have more difficulty in this area, where these things occur a little more frequent than they would for someone who does not have ADHD. Or the intensity is just on 11, if you will, for those of you musicians who get my reference. Basically, these things happen, but they're really intense and impactful compared to other people. So hopefully we can work on that for those of us who need to. So, let's jump on into it. Weaknesses of FE dominance. So, weaknesses usually stem from FE-TI imbalances. TI is the exact polar opposite function, dominant function. And people who are TI dominants are INTPs and ISTPs. So, moving on. First point, have trouble living in the moment without judgment. Now, that J function can certainly cause us to have a standard for a lot of different things, and sometimes too high of a standard, especially for those of us who've grown up in a home or one or both parents are just will not accept anything but what they think should be. And sometimes that standard is a little rigid and a little hard. And that can have some consequences in the future. So perhaps something to reflect upon. See what friends or family members have told you if you have an issue with that. So yeah, it's true. It's not always easy. It's sometimes hard for some people to J function. Not only ESFJs and ENFJs, but it's hard for people of other personality types who are of the judging function as well to sometimes live in the moment because they're just so ready to go on to the next step or the next procedure or next thing that's due instead of just basking in the glory of the moment and being like, this is the present time, man. Let's get the most we can out of this experience. It's all good. So sometimes that can be a difficulty. I've worked with some people at the J function, some of them balanced, some of them unbalanced, and I've noticed that issue with those that are not balanced. They continually ask, when is this going to be over? How long is this going to take? When can we go on to the next thing? And it's like, this is the thing. This is the thing. Immerse yourself in the activity. Take it for what it is. Sometimes we have very precious, unique moments in life that we can't appreciate because we're too much in a rush. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Classic phrase. Sometimes we gotta look around. We don't know what we're gonna miss. So, not exactly the quote, but you know the drill. So, moving on. Rely too much on external sources for moral direction and constructing the sense of self. This is one that I highlighted and read because it's an issue I see with a lot of ESFJs and some ENFJs as well, is that their moral compass and a good foundation of who they are comes from external sources, and sometimes that can come a lot from the mainstream media. And the mainstream media is, for the most part, out for profit, not exactly to fulfill your moral ground as a person or to refine yourself and grow as an individual. It's like, fit the mold or else. And that's pretty tough. One of the biggest things of human nature is human connection. You see videos on YouTube of people, reaction videos they're called. And sometimes millions or thousands of people see someone just react to another video. That's the urge and need for human connection in the digital age. That we want to feel like we're there with that person. We share that experience of them seeing something, perhaps a sporting event or a special moment for the first time. We want to feel like we're there with them sharing that moment. Human connection is one of the most important things we have in our life. Unfortunately, sometimes we'll build a bridge to that with a bit more artificial means. I've worked with multiple ESFJs and ENFJs who have spoken to me pretty deeply about this, and some of them have even told me they didn't feel like they had a choice. They told me I felt like myself, my real self from within, people weren't going to like that. They might not want to be my friend. They might not want to hang out. And that's something to really reflect upon. Finding who you are, refining your strengths and your weaknesses, and growing as a person isn't always the easiest thing. And through the means of external sources, or at the hands of chance a lot of the time, we really got to reflect upon that. Your individual self matters. And don't ever forget that. If you have a hard time sometimes standing up for yourself, or saying what you really feel, perhaps little by little start talking. You'd be surprised. People care a lot more than you might think. And to add one final note to that, how does ADHD play a role in that point, is that we get stimulated as human beings by sometimes doing things that we think other people are going to like and dig, and we want the connection with them and all. There's nothing wrong with that, but when you have ADHD and your reward system is low, your serotonin and dopamine levels are low, especially with social media that studies have shown raises your dopamine quite high, we're going to start doing a lot of stuff we wouldn't otherwise do in the pictures and videos that we post. And that can really have an impact on our lives in terms of how we allocate time and this and that. So the social validation, it's very important for a lot of people. But for what it's worth, from my opinion, you gotta be yourself. There's nothing more beautiful and lovely in human connection, in my opinion, than when you refine yourself and you truly connect with people or someone, a group of people, whatever, and it's sincerely based off who you are, your refined version of yourself, based off genuineness from within, as opposed to connecting to somebody based off perhaps something that's a little more artificial. Well, what do I mean by more artificial? Predisposed mindsets and views of life, as opposed to stuff gained from the individual knowledge. I can get pretty philosophical, but I'm not. If you feel you fit under that category, then you feel that due to the ADHD, you constantly need to do things to connect and fit in with other people, and on the inside, you don't feel too good because it doesn't feel sincere to you because you might not really like that or want to do that. I urge you to at least reflect. The individuality of an individual should not be diminished. You can connect with other people just as deeply, if not more, based off the individuality of the self. I'm a true believer in that. Let's go on to the next point. Uncomfortable with conflict, dissent, or disagreement. There's a certain urge and need I've noticed with some ESFJs and ENFJs that they want to have this sense of harmony that's so strong that even if they perceive, or maybe might not perceive, that other people need to resolve their conflict, they will just try to force the harmony in the scenario. And we got to be careful about that, because certain people need to talk stuff out. Sometimes we need a little conflict, a little friction, in order for change to happen, in order for relationships and people to improve. We need to talk about stuff that we might not always want to talk about, and that's okay. But if we have an issue doing it, perhaps that's where refinement comes in. We take it little by little. There's many different resources online that can help you, and all over Instagram too. Or there's people offering all sorts of different great pieces of advice of what you can do if you're someone who feels like you haven't been able to speak up for yourself. So understand though, just like you have your ADHD conflicts and difficulties that you need to talk out with your partner, your friends, or your colleagues or family members, that other people need to do that too. Not always for ADHD, but for their own reasons as well. There's a time to be happy, a time to be sad, a time to be upset, and for the rest of the emotions. We just got to make sure that they don't override and bring us down. Balance is key. Next point, tend to dismiss personal needs or priorities as selfish and focus too much on obligations in the external world. Need to rationalize / justify behaviors that are done for oneself. Okay? This could potentially be an issue that some ESFJs and ENFJs have, because they're so willing to work for other things and other people that they might not dedicate time for themselves, and that can lead to a whole another list of problems, which we will elaborate with in a couple of points. The next point, difficulty understanding that making good choices often involves careful analysis and choosing well between competing interests cannot satisfy everyone. That's something that's a lot easier said than done. I've worked with some ESFJs and some ENFJs that it's like they have not fathomed the thought to make a decision that's going to benefit them more over benefiting other people they're working with. And that can lead to a lot of resentment, a lot of problems. The self is important. Self-care is important. You matter. And you matter just as much as those people that you love and care for as well. And for the most part, most loved ones want the same back for you. We just might not be able to tell sometimes, or they have a way of doing it that within their own personality type and cognitive functions is differently perceived towards us. When I studied cognitive functions deeper, it made me understand human interaction, human nature, and how we connect, and the issues that we have a whole lot better and a whole lot deeper. Just like I said earlier, knowledge truly is power. So, we have to watch out for ourselves, and also we need to be careful if our J function has us doing many different projects, and we start a bunch and we don't finish any, or we just finish one and we just disregard other ones, or we just go full on and try to do a bunch of projects and just stress ourselves out, and then we might become really intense and irritable, resentful, and extreme emotion, or rejection sensitive dysphoria might be hit. Now, for some of you watching, you're probably wondering, what is rejection sensitive dysphoria? Rejection sensitive dysphoria is the heightened sense of emotions that people with ADHD have due to our central nervous system being heightened. This is an advantage back in our nomadic days as humans. So, when we get rejected, for example, or we feel like we let somebody down, it feels absolutely horrible. We feel like we might never want to see that person again, or be around that person, or that place again. So, that's just a little snippet of what rejection sensitive dysphoria is. For those of you who are more interested, I have a whole video about rejection sensitive dysphoria, how it causes us problems, those of us with ADHD, and how we can resolve a lot of those problems and live life to our full potential. Because unfortunately, rejection sensitive dysphoria stops us from living life to our full potential. There should be a link above if you want to check it out. Next point. Can appear overbearing, intrusive, or meddlesome to others. So, this certainly not a thing with all ESFJs and ENFJs, but some that I worked with, yeah, they do like to meddle in gossip and drama and almost soap opera-like behavior. And sometimes that comes from some bad habits when we're growing up, or that comes from the way some of our parents brought us up. And something I read in research too is that people who are FEs, usually extroverted feeling types, this includes other extroverted feeling types, like the ENFP and the ESFP as well, for example. What ends up happening is that if an extroverted feeling type does not get a lot of love, affection, and connection with people when they're younger, especially close family, they end up wanting to get that from pretty much wherever they can get it, the worse off they are with that. So people who are extroverted feeling types, they're going to try to find that acceptance and sort of give me attention, give me affection, or else is the type of vibe that can happen, unfortunately. So if you fall into that category and you feel you have difficulty with that, perhaps you might want to see someone or work with someone that is in your area that can help you out, because talking about that is really difficult, or it can be really difficult for some of us. So it's an interesting thing, because once I read that research and I analyzed some of the people that I worked with, and it made a whole lot of sense, because it's important to know that. It might give you a different perspective next time you see someone going out there fishing for compliments from people, or people that set up scenarios out in public where amongst family or friends or strangers where they just want to get admiration for people. That can come for many different reasons, but if it feels too forced and it's too frequent that it happens, it might be an issue when they were younger. Something to look into. Difficulty re-examining, readjusting values that have been universalized, thus ignoring important differences in individual preferences or cultural norms. So, with ADHD, once we get a concept down or a view down sometimes, or even a system down, a lot of us don't have the amount of dopamine it takes to be able to be motivated enough to learn something completely new, and then we're just like, no, we know what we know, we just want to stay with that, don't make us go and do all of this again. It was hard enough the first time, is what some people with ADHD have difficulty with. Why? Because having sustained attention for long periods of time is a hallmark difficulty of ADHD. This has to do with the difficulty levels of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin as well. So this can be quite difficult, but we have to see the unique nature that are the different personality types amongst people. Even people of the same personality type can be radically different people, as I mentioned earlier. So sometimes instead of just having one way of looking at something, we need to see the person, the place, the thing for the uniqueness of what they are, instead of just being like, oh, this person's just a this, and then just disregarding it. Life and people are not always that simple. We need to be a little careful sometimes, and especially people with the J function. We need to be a little careful and not just assume that, okay, this person doesn't have the standard that I have for this, or the standard that majority of people have for this, so I'm just gonna disregard this person as unworthy or just not good. What ends up happening is, if you judge everyone by that same notion, you can really end up mistyping, miscasting, or misunderstanding people who are nothing like what you might think they are. So, we need to put that stuff on check. We need to put that stuff on check. Because we all got different skill sets, and we all got different difficulties and weaknesses, and ADHD certainly gives us a lot of difficulty and weaknesses. Because of ADHD, I'm certain some of you with some of these cognitive functions or personality types have been mistyped or misunderstood because of your own condition, I imagine. And it sucks. It doesn't feel good. So remember that the next time you're working with someone and you feel like, okay, this person doesn't have this or that. I mean, we got to be realistic, of course. Let's not jump to the extreme either. But at the same time, let's not jump to conclusions always so quickly. Let's analyze the whole situation. Difficulty seeing the social values can be restrictive and force people into unnecessary conformity. So again, going to the mainstream media point we made earlier, or just the common notions, that the one-size-fits-all collective aspect of social values is not going to fit everyone. We all come from different cultures, different means of life, different classes, different... You name it. We're all unique in that sense. You name it. We're all unique in that sense. Over here in the U.S., it's a big melting pot, and there's lots of wonderful and diverse people all around the world, too. So, we can't be too restrictive, and we shouldn't try to force people to fit a certain mold. When I was younger, I was around a lot of people who threatened and hurt and just did all sorts of horrible things back in the early 90s when I was growing up in elementary school. I was around a lot of coercive people, a lot of first-generation kids that they wanted other people to act the way they did and to act with the social norms of the time. And if you didn't do that, you were going to get your butt kicked, or you were going to be threatened or insulted if you didn't do the social norms like everybody else was doing. It sucked. It made me and a bunch of other kids have to toughen up in order to stand up to those people. I would tell people, I'm going to be who I am. You're not going to tell me what to like and what to hate. I always found that really judgmental and messed up, but that's what can happen. That's the power of the mainstream media. You have to act like that. Otherwise, you're not going to connect with people. It's the unconscious notion. The truth is, we can't connect with people. What the mainstream media presents as reality isn't the full reality. Sometimes it's not the reality at all. There's a lot of conditioning from the mainstream media and from a lot of different notions that come with it. So you gotta be careful. Don't let the individual within yourself be coerced into being a category, into only believing and thinking that you can only do things because you belong to that category, that thing, and you're only allowed to do that. That's a lie. You might get negative actions from other people and like negative results, but the idea that you have to do or have to like or have to hate or whatever it is, otherwise it's wrong or you're less of a person because of it, those are manipulative means. Those are psychological manipulative means. Do not let the individual within yourself die out. Refine yourself. Refine the individual within. If you feel like you haven't looked within that deep, I urge you to look into your intuition, into who you are. The saddest thing for me to see is an individual that can't find themselves or that never finds themselves and that lives life thinking that in order to connect and to get love, they have to do all these things. And for some instances, you have to do certain things, but we got to be wise about what we choose and what we do. It's a really deep conversation that goes way beyond this video, but let's move on. Next point, require people to adhere to social rules, values. It can be coercive, so sometimes when it comes to that J function and the difficulty it brings, we might feel like people have to follow these notions, these rules, these patterns of behaviors, these social norms. And yeah, what ends up happening is if that stuff is really validated and conditioned in our upbringing, what ends up happening is when we're around other people who don't value those things as much, we might get a little intense. Our rejection sensitive dysphoria might kick off and we might be like, what's going on? How dare that person not do this? How dare that person question the authority figure or whoever or whatever for that matter? So we got to understand, folks, that different situations are going to yield different results and the authority figure isn't always correct. I remember being in college and me being a introverted thinking type, I would sometimes say points in classes where I would be a bit more informed of the instructor of something, and it's an educational environment. I would raise my hand to have a discussion about the point we were talking about in class, and I noticed some ESFJs and perhaps even some ENFJs kind of whispering amongst themselves, like, how dare this person or this guy go and question the teacher or the author of the book's authority. And it's like, the information is out there. There's some of us who study very frequently and who delve really deep into subject matters in their studies. And just because an instructor is an instructor doesn't mean they are the end-all be-all of that subject matter. There are certainly going to be students and other people who are going to be more informed than some of these people. And that changes. So we got to be sometimes understanding that not everything is just black or white, follow the rules, or this has to happen or that has to. No. There's consequences for breaking social norms, social rules and stuff of that nature. But at the same time, we should not be coercive towards people to have to do with that. A good example of this would be a lot of us with ADHD have difficulty in a lot of subject matters in school and in life. Yet we have a lot of the same restrictions and limits placed off people who don't have ADHD. Is that really fair? No, because we have a different type of brain and we work really differently. So in that instance, someone with ADHD is not going to be judged by the same notion, or ideally shouldn't be viewed exactly by the same notion, perhaps in a school or academic environment. They're going to need a bit more help in certain areas and a bit more understanding. So for myself, having ADHD, when I was in high school, middle school, yeah, I had to break quite a bit of rules just to get by in my studies because I couldn't follow the regular system of what the school was because I wasn't diagnosed until my mid-20s with ADHD. So a lot of us with ADHD have had to break a ton of rules. What's interesting, though, is there's this unconscious notion that some ENFJs or ESFJs have that they might not be too keen on certain authority or certain rules unconsciously, but they're totally okay with the ones that they have difficulty with. So sometimes we might have that bias. A lot of people do. So we got to be understanding of the different difficulties that we have. The one-size-fits-all system does not fit everyone, as we've learned. So, individuality, let's not forget about it. Can overburden themselves with social life and responsibilities. Now, I know quite a bit of ESFJs and ENFJs who are quite social, and the ADHD is really going to cause some of us, especially those of us who have hyperactive ADHD, or perhaps those who are combined type who are half hyperactive and the other half inattentive, might want to do it too. But if we keep going out and keep having and setting up of these things, because people of the J function, what I've noticed, they like setting up different events and things and events they're going to go to, but at the same time we can overburden ourselves, especially if the ADHD is not being taken care of, whether that's with treatment, supplements, or diet, or exercise. Those are really helpful and really essential for ADHD. But unfortunately, sometimes we're not aware of when we're overdoing ourselves, and that's something I've noticed with people of the J function sometimes. Not all of them, but a certain amount of them. That they're not aware when they're overworking themselves. They're aware of when they overwork themselves after they've done something really intense or something they feel really bad about. They're like, okay, maybe I did overwork myself. But the damage is done at that point. We got to start pinpointing and finding out when these issues start, when we're overdoing ourselves. Whether that's looking to our body for tension or for stress, analyzing, why does my mind feel like this? Why do I feel bad right now? Am I overdoing it? Analyze, become intuitive, and see what is it. What are the themes and frequent things that occur when you're stressed out? You find that out, you're going to be able to more or so put yourself on check by changing your environment, changing your behavior as well. And having ADHD, going out constantly is very stimulating, so that can make this even harder. So you should be a little careful and considerate about that. Nothing wrong with going out on a trip and having a good time with family and friends, but at the same time, sometimes we gotta modify how often we do certain things, and we gotta have a hierarchy of responsibilities. Because when we have ADHD, some people, the hierarchy at the top is feeling good at whatever the cost, and that can get pretty dangerous and that can get pretty troubling and stressful. The next point, high pressure to harmonize or meet the needs of others can lead to self-neglect and or lashing out through excessive criticism. So this is what I mentioned earlier, that some ESFJs and ENFJs can throw themselves under the bus for friends or family so much that they're going to build so much resentment and negativity within them that they're going to start acting and lashing out in a really negative manner that is really unlike them. And that's because at that point you become your shadow personality. The ESFJ becomes an INTP, one that is so nitpicky in a negative state that they point out every single wrong thing that's been done to them, perhaps, when the ESFJ isn't feeling good. The ENFJ can become the ISTP, which is a very brutal and blunt personality that is also really detailed oriented and will tell you everything you've done wrong under the moon, the sun, and the stars, and etc., etc. So in order to avoid feeling like that, we got to be aware that we matter too. Our actions matter. Our relaxation and our self-care matter. That needs to be up in the top 10 things of importance in your life, is allowing yourself enough time to take care of yourself and to feel balanced and good. You cannot go out there and expect great results from your actions if deep inside you're not feeling good. You're overstressed, you're overworked, and you're tired. And I know we got to push ourselves a lot of the time. But in those instances where we have the chance and knowledge to stop ourselves from doing that, we should take the initiative to do that. And to start working on a regimen, hopefully, where we allow ourselves time for self-care and time for self-reflection. Because I know some ESFJs and some ENFJs that have stayed in brutal relationships. I'm talking intense relationships where they have been abused, lied to, taken advantage of, cheated on, you name it, and they stay in that relationship because they truly believe that some positive notion is going to come and it's all going to change. ESFJs and ENFJs got a big heart. You're willing to give a good chance, and a lot of chances sometimes, where perhaps you shouldn't. Remember what we spoke about. You matter too. Sometimes we gotta step away from a relationship. Perhaps the partner we're with is being intense, abusive, and manipulative, and that might not be the partner for you. That might not be the workplace, the boss, the colleagues for you. Whatever it is, we gotta be careful. We gotta know when enough is enough. We have to move on. Why? Because you matter. Last point, difficulty integrating knowledge that is unrelated to social life. So that can certainly be an issue for some ENFJs and ESFJs, that if it doesn't have to do with the social aspect or friends or other people, whatever, it's just like, is it really useful knowledge? Yeah, there's a lot of useful knowledge that has little or nothing to do with social life. This is coming from an introvert, so believe you me. So anyways, let's move on. Quite the lengthy list of subject matters right there, of areas of difficulty of FI DOMs that are also TI inferior. So yeah, not always the easiest stuff to talk about, but certainly stuff to reflect upon and stuff that is possible to improve for those of us who do want to improve those things or have difficulty with them. So let us go now to the difficulty that ESFJs and ENFJs have. These are things that are going to make an ESFJ or ENFJ just feel bad, horrible. So if you are an ESFJ/ENFJ, or if you're dating one, these are things that you're going to want to sort of improve or refine in your life. If you think you have difficulty with, I highly recommend that, because being in environments or being around people that are not going to do you all that good and are definitely going to make your cognitive functions feel really harshly, and especially if it's very frequent, this is going to have dire effects on your motivation, determination, which are already things that are compromised due to the ADHD. So these things can be really, really provoking for an ESFJ, ENFJ. So let's listen closely and let's take a gander. Let's take a look. How FE DOMs are triggered. What to be careful about. FE DOMs can be emotionally triggered in a variety of ways, such as feeling misunderstood by others, feeling unappreciated or taken for granted or not taken seriously, being treated impersonally or dismissively, feeling an absence of trust, feeling pressure to conform to rules or standards that they disagree with, experiencing situations that do not provide closure, having relationships with unresolved issues/conflicts, feeling stifled and having no opportunity to apply skills, talents, abilities, having too many demanding deadlines or extra responsibilities, being forced to work through really difficult ideas/concepts independently, being forced to do detailed analytical activities for long periods of time, experiencing excessively negative disagreements that are perceived as personal attacks, being unable to persuade others or get their point across when necessary, feeling as though there is no time to talk out important issues, long-term exposure to environments that do not value the welfare of people, seeing people not recognized for their hard work or contributions, overly competitive or socially cold/toxic environments, dealing with uncooperative or aloof people, having to constantly mediate interpersonal conflicts, being immersed in disorganized or unpredictable environments. So as we can see, those are some pretty heavy points to bring and to analyze and discuss. Now that you know some of those points, perhaps you can look back. And before I move on, I want to mention that all these points that we're discussing, all the points I discussed earlier, and the points we just discussed now, they're going to be available in a PDF in the links box down below, along with the rest of the links for the exams and stuff you guys saw earlier in the video. That's all available in the description down below. So there'll be a link to a PDF that includes everything we're discussing right now in this whole section of the difficulties that ESFJs, ENFJs have. So that way, if you yourself are an ESFJ or an ENFJ and know that you have difficulties with some of these, I urge you to download the PDF document and write notes on the stuff that you have difficulty with and start working on it. That's what I did for myself. Once I found out my own inferior functions and what my own personality type and what I had difficulty with, I was like, shoot, I need to start working on this as soon as possible. I stink at this and I'm not great at that. And it's a work in progress. It takes some people quite a while. It takes some people sometimes a little while. And it depends on what it is too. So different things are going to come at different speeds. And with ADHD, we just want stuff really quick sometimes. And that's not the way life works. That's not the way improvement in behavior works. It takes determination. It takes a lot of follow-up when we want to improve or when we want to do something good. So, yeah, these are pretty tough. If you're in a work environment or in a relationship where a lot of these things pop up frequently, we have the choice to improve the relationship by talking stuff out. This would be really helpful to talk with your partner if you have difficulty with some of these things. And perhaps if they have ADHD as well, they can see an ADHD video that I made on their own personality type. And they can go and do the same thing we're doing here with the ESFJ and ENFJ, with the FI DOMs. We can do that with whatever personality type they got as well. That way you can both work on the issues that you have and help each other out instead of pinpointing, name-calling, and blaming one another, which is very common with ADHD. We don't want to take the blame a lot of the times. It feels bad. And you throw in rejection-sensitive dysphoria, forget about it. It makes it even crazier. So I hope these points were of some help. I hope these resources can be of some help to you and your partner and your family. I've worked with quite a bit of families, and it saddens me sometimes that when the ADHD is not taken care of and when these things are not known to the parents, the kids can suffer quite a bit. Kids in ADHD families, especially undiagnosed ADHD families, or in families where only one parent is conscious of the ADHD and takes it seriously, it can be really intense and really dramatic and really negative on the kids and on that one partner, because that one partner might feel all the weight of the world on them and like their partner doesn't support them. ADHD is real. The issues in the neurochemistry, the gene mutations that we have, all of that is sincere, all of that is real. We need to take ADHD seriously. And this, our family and our relationship, should be of much high importance. So I truly hope that this information presented in this video can help you and your partner out and help your family out. So you guys can improve, the value of your life can improve, and that love and connection in your life can improve with you and all of those around you. I wish you all the best. Well, that's it for today, folks. Another ADHD video by your ADHD comrade Wilhelm. Over and out.